Game over.
Death
representations in virtual reality environments.
Whenever we see video games and violence in the same sentence, often the focus is on the negative impacts, such as the violent scenes in games can disturb players throughout their lives. Players may eventually perform in real life the violence they see in games. Games can make it harder for players to form social bonds and hinder their learning capability. However, since their inception, games have evolved fast. Games are now a complex combination of art, storytelling, and game mechanics. Death is frequent in games, and it is being enhanced with virtual reality. Some of these representations of death can affect players long after a game session, although they are safe behind the screen. Not much is known on how game users perceive death in virtual spaces. In this exploratory research, we have the following questions. 1. How players' death is perceived in 3D virtual environments. 2. How the immersion offered by VR can affect players' emotions. Rayane, you're up.
Gotcha! Unlike movies, books, or TV shows where consumers are mere spectators, games are a very different form of entertainment, where players both spectate and are also actors in the game's universe. According to both Henriksen and Mishra, promotes empathy. While players may never have gone to medical school, playing as a doctor allows one to better understand what they do and what their struggles are. No matter the role, the abstractions and simplifications of a game actually can help players better understand other people by being on their shoes inside the digital spaces. Virtual reality is already being used to take things another step further, not only for entertainment, but death experiences as well, or even bring someone back from death. In February of this year, in the South Korean TV documentary Meeting You, showcased VR being used to recreate a mother's dead daughter. While controversial, it is not the first use of virtual reality to explore death-related topics. In the matter of death, it is interesting that players and developers have been using game environments to homage loved ones who passed away. Death can also be interpreted in many different ways in games. Inevitable for the sake of the game's story, some characters' deaths are impossible to avoid. Permadeath. The character dies, they're gone, forever. Mechanical. Death may be the only way to learn and progress. Safe to say, death has been depicted in many different ways in games. Danilo, your move.
We used an online survey with 5 distinct sections: introduction, demographic profile and gaming habits, how the volunteers perceive death in games, analysis of game trailers and pictures, and closure. The survey had a total of 29 questions and was shared with other users via altered social media profiles. From questions 1 to 13, they had to answer objective and discursive questions. From questions 14 to 29, they had to analyze audiovisual materials from the following games: Skyrim VR, an adventure game with medievals and fantasy themes like Lord of the Rings; Resident Evil 7 VR, a horror game similar to Texas Chainsaw Massacre; and VR Chat, a social game where death does not exist. Data analysis was done via a quantitative methodology. It was performed by the authors. We were cross-examining the answers obtained on objective questions, with that the volunteer declaring the discursive questions. All games were chosen for being popular games and widely available VR versions. Skyrim and Resident Evil 7, despite death in more traditional way for the games with a game over screen. VR Chat, as a social game, does not have a game over screen, yet players have used it to realize posthumous homage to their deceased loved ones. Back to you, Vini.
Sure, we had a total of 37 volunteers, 32 male and 5 female. 26 were aged between 18 to 25, 8 between 26 to 35, and 3 between 36 to 45. On their daily gaming habits, 14 declared to spend less than 2 hours playing games, 10 said to spend between 2 to 4 daily hours, 6 declared to spend between 4 to 6 hours, and 2 declared to spend between 6 to 8 hours playing games. About gaming platforms of their preference, 33 said they prefer PCs or laptops, 14 prefer consoles, 3 prefer portable consoles like Game Boys, Nintendo 3DS, PlayStation Portables, and 17 prefer their smartphones. About previous virtual reality experiences, 25 never experienced VR, in contrast to 12 who did. what aspects of that volunteer said it affected them the most, 16 declared narrative aspects, 15 their skills as a player and interactions with other players, and 6 declared game mechanics. When asked how they perceived death in games, there were various answers on the matter, but most of them included death as a learning experience, or death as an evidence of players' or characters' failures in that moment. Rayane, let's talk about some games.
Right. The first game analyzed by volunteers was Skyrim. It seems, in regards to Skyrim, players can always reverse death and its consequences by loading the last saved data. Since Skyrim always focuses on empowering the player, death in the game's context is not important, just an inconvenience to be dealt with. In contrast, Resident Evil 7 results were quite different from Skyrim, as volunteers were more scared and shocked with in-game deaths. They were designed to provoke physical and psychological discomfort, despite death in-game being reversed the same way as Skyrim. How the death was presented was very important to volunteers. Due to provoke stress caused by the game in a safe environment, it is important to highlight that virtual environments can be a valuable tool for observation of human behavior in stressful situations. With VR chat, volunteers agree that it really is a place where people can connect with each other. Yet, due to their experiences, games often focus on entertainment first. Players agree that it could be a suitable place to hold a funeral for a loved one, although most were neutral, homaging a loved one through a game. Now finished, Danilo?
Virtual environments are viable for human manifestations normally expressed into the real world, such as funeral, protests, and reunions. VR can provide a way to keep anyone's memory and personal history alive long after the users pass away. Also be an educational tool to teach how to deal with existential issues caused by death. With that, we are done.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
See you at the presentation.